After fighting your way out of the dark and dangerous dungeon, you decide that maybe the nightlife is not for you. Instead, you desire to look upon much more beautiful things than decrepit dungeons filled with undead beasts. So you decide to leave Daggerfall and make your way to Menevia. Once you arrive, you wander the town in search for the house of Dibella. You approach a follower of Dibella who says to you, "Hello and welcome to Anatomy of Fiction. In today's video, we will be discussing Dibella. More specifically, why would anyone choose to worship Dibella, and why you may want to on your next playthrough. To do this, we must first go over several things, starting with who even is Dibella, so some of the mythology surrounding her, what she is known as, and what she is known for. After this, we will move on to discussing who are the followers of Dibella, so the various cults worshipping Dibella throughout Tamriel, along with which races have worshipped Dibella and how she has been worshipped. Then we will move on to discussing the various beliefs and teachings surrounding Dibella. Finally, we will discuss the creations of Dibella. So let us begin with who is Dibella. Dibella is known as one of the Aedra, a member of the 8 or 9 divines depending on your pantheon. When it comes to who Dibella is, we should consider the Atmoran religion, this being the precursor religion to the Nordic religion. In this religion, Dibella's totem was the silver moth. This continued through to her representation in the early Nordic religion. Now, throughout the eras, Dibella has come to represent several things as a divine, these including affection, art, and music. She has also gained many names, including the Goddess of Beauty. To others, she is known as the Lady of Love, and to some, she is even known as the Queen of Heaven, along with other nicknames like the Lady, the Passion Dancer, and our Blessed Lady. When it comes to the mythology surrounding Dibella, there are some rather interesting tales, these varying depending on faith, but all having some basis in the origins of existent stories. An example of this being the Anuad. Although Dibella is not specifically mentioned by name, her existence is explained through this myth. So this myth is a story of Anu and Padme being the first things to exist. Anu, throughout the various myths, represents stasis and order, whilst Padme represents chaos and change. Now, Anu and Padme were the first to exist in the void. With their existence, time would begin. As they would wander this void, the interaction between light and darkness would create Nia. The brothers would be amazed and delighted by her. However, Nia loved Anu. This would leave Padme bitter, so Padme would leave. Nia would become pregnant and Padme would return. Here, he would confess his love for Nia, and Nia would tell Padme that she did not love him. She only loved Anu. Padme would beat Nia in a rage. Anu would return and fight Padme, casting him outside of time. Nia would then give birth to creation, but she would pass from her injuries soon after. Anu, in his grief, would hide himself in the sun and sleep. Time would pass by and life would sprout on the 12 worlds. And after many ages, Padme would be able to return to time. Padme would see creation and he would hate it. Padme would swing his sword and destroy the 12 worlds. Anu would then awake and fight his brother. The battle would be long and violent. However, Anu would eventually win against Padme. Anu would throw aside the body of Padme, believing him to be dead. Then Anu would attempt to form the remnants of the 12 worlds into one, this being Nian. However, as Anu was doing this, Padme would strike his brother through the chest with one final blow. Anu would fight with his brother and he would pull them both outside of time forever. And with their blood, it would create more. The blood of Padme would create the Daedra. The blood of Anu would create the stars. The blood of both intermingled would create the Aedra. This being why the Aedra, like Dibella, would have a greater connection to worldly affairs, but would give them affinity for both good and evil. Now, if we instead look at the Cyrodiilic myth of creation, this being Shazar's song, creation is attributed to the work of the Aedra themselves. In this story, Shazar had described to the Aedra the idea of creation, describing to the gods becoming mothers and fathers, being responsible, making sacrifices without the guarantee of success, the beauty of it all. He spoke so beautifully that he convinced the other Aedra to participate in creation. They would create the world, the beasts, and the beings, all from parts of themselves. However, this experience was not what many of them expected, as it was very painful. After this, the Aedra were no longer as young and powerful as they once were. This would lead to some Aedra, the gods of the Oldma, to feel disappointed and bitter about this, feeling as though they had lost something through the act of creation. Auriel would lead these elven gods. They would be disgusted by themselves and what they had created. Everything is spoiled, for now and for all of time, and the most we can do is teach the elven races to suffer nobly, with dignity, and chastise ourselves for our folly, and avenge ourselves upon Shezar and his allies. Now the gods of man and beast viewed this differently. Being led by Akatosh, they would praise and cherish their creations. We have suffered and are diminished for all time, but the mortal world we have made is glorious, filling our hearts and spirits with hope. Let us teach the mortal races to live well, to cherish beauty and honor, and to love one another as we love them. This is the pantheon that Dibella would come under. We see this with the somewhat close relationship Dibella seems to have with her followers, and that some followers may seem to have with each other, if you get what I mean. So based on who Dibella is, why would anyone choose to worship Dibella? Considering that Dibella is praised as the goddess of beauty and the lady of love, that she is also suggested to have a close relationship with her followers, closer than most of the other divines. With this, we see that Dibella, through being the goddess of affection, those who may find themselves feeling lonely, desiring love, or even desiring approval for their unusual loves, considering that Dibella originally comes from the pantheon of man, she is seen as a much more loving god when it comes to her followers. So to those who need hope and encouragement rather than suffering like the gods of the Mer promote, Dibella being the goddess of love and beauty would be a good way to go. This is only one piece of the puzzle. To learn more, we should discuss the followers of Dibella. Now, there are many cults of Dibella, each having their own focus, with some focusing on women, others artists or aesthetics, but others concentrate on providing instruction when it comes to games of hide the sausage. So when it comes to the followers of Dibella, there are many throughout the races and the eras, with some of these followers even being considered to be extinct. One of these being the Kothringi, the native humans of Blackmarsh, known to have gone extinct with the Nahatan flu in the Second Era. Now, we see this worship by the Kothringi as not only were they known as the lustrous folk of Blackmarsh, but they also, in their city of Gideon, had a shrine dedicated to Dibella. This being the only shrine still standing in the city of Gideon. Now, not much else is known about these silver-skinned humans when it comes to their worship of Dibella. However, there are many others who would worship the divine. We see Dibella also being worshipped in Cyrodiil. Here in the city of Anvil, in both the Second and Third eras, the city had a chapel of Dibella. Throughout its time in Anvil, it had been a place of many rituals worshipping Dibella, including the practice of priests dancing down the lanes every morning as part of their worship. However, with time, there would be changes to various things, like the rituals that were practiced inside of the chapel, the interior of the chapel, and the sort of clothing that was worn whilst worshipping Dibella. Not everyone would appreciate these changes, some being rather disappointed with the direction the chapel and its worship had headed. Now in the Third Era, we would also see the worship of Dibella in Cyrodiil through the presence of the way shrines across Cyrodiil and the presence of her statue within the Arboretum within the Imperial City. Now we would also see the presence of a Dibella cult spring up in the Second Era, this cult being between Cyrodiil and Solstice. This would be the Blushing Brush. This group were a group of artists. They sought beauty in all things and would express it in their art. As part of their beliefs, they viewed Sanguine as a corruption of Dibella's ideals. Many of those who were part of the cult were previously worshippers of Sanguine before they converted to Dibella. Now, we would also see Dibella's presence throughout Skyrim over the eras. This, of course, being firstly with the Atmorans, these being the humans that would come over from Atmora, these being the ancestors of Nords, among other human races. So the Atmorans were known to have a totem-based religion. which is where we would get what was known as the cult of Mother Moth. Now, not much is known about the Atmoran religions along with the cult of Mother Moth. What we do know comes from fragmented translations of Atmoran texts. Mother Moth sees us all. She sees who is faithful and those who are unfaithful. The glorious Mother Moth exudes patience, excellence, softness, and love. Because, like all moths, the Mother Moth craves light. The Mother Moth must be honored with nightly burnings of bonfires. By doing so, the mysteries of Mother Moth will be revealed in the flames, the stars, and the light in the darkness. Because Mother Moth has unending hunger, the offerings cannot manage to satiate her. This is why her followers take on her desires as their own. Now, this would be the precursor to the Nordic religion, which would begin as a totemic religion, but would then move into their form of religion, which is where Dibella would begin to be called Dibella by them. We can see evidence of the Nordic worship of Dibella up into the 4th era, this being through the various shrines dedicated to Dibella throughout the wilderness, and through the towns and cities, along with her presence in the Temple of the Divines in the Reach, and the Temple of Dibella in the city of Markarth, which is technically in the Reach area of Skyrim. Now, Reach folk also do in some cases revere Dibella. We see this especially in the 4th era, part of this being evident with the various Reach folk being willing to give their child to the Temple of Dibella if they were chosen as the Sibyl of Dibella, the person who communes with the goddess. In the year 201 in the 4th era, the Sibyl was Fiotra, a Reach child who was being held prisoner by the Forsworn. After being rescued by the last Dragonborn, she takes on the role and learns from the priestesses of Dibella. Now, this Skyrim/Reach cult makes up part of the House of Dibella. So now elsewhere in Tamriel, in the provinces of High Rock, Hammerfell, Black Marsh, Cyrodiil, and again, even in Skyrim, we do see the presence of a large cult known as the House of Dibella. This House of Dibella has been around for eras, dating as far back as the year 221 in the First Era. Now, with the existence of this cult, part of their purpose has been to preserve great works of art, leading to their scouts scouring Tamriel to find these treasures. Now, all of these chapters of the House of Dibella throughout Tamriel, each house would have a member known as a Sibyl, who was the sort of spiritual leader of these chapters. Now, in these houses of Dibella, there can also be what is known as the Order of the Lily. Now, this Order of the Lily is an order of knights devoted to Dibella. They protect the priests and priestesses of the House of Dibella. Their reason for fighting being beauty as their cause. So based on the worshippers of Dibella, why would anyone choose to worship Dibella? Throughout the regions of Tamriel, the followers of Dibella worship her for a variety of different reasons, with some worshipping her due to their love of creating art, like the Blushing Brush, who were a cult of Dibella worshippers who looked for the beauty in everything and attempted to share that through their art. Or others who attempted to preserve art, like in part the House of Dibella, with many seeing the beauty in everything through their worship of Dibella. Others worship Dibella for other reasons, like the Atmorans, who saw the worship of their version of Dibella as a sort of permission to seek out their desires and fulfill what they craved. But this is only one part of the story, not the full picture. But hold up for a second. Before we continue discussing the goddess of beauty and love, I would like to thank Fandomonium for the video suggestion. But anyway, back to the video. To learn more, we should move on to the teachings of Dibella. So when it comes to the teachings of Dibella, there are several things that should be discussed. Firstly, we should look into what makes the will and the teachings known of the goddess, this being the Dibellan Sibyl. Now with this, there is little shared about how a Sibyl is essentially chosen for her position. This ritual is known as the Exalted Protocol of the Dibellan Sibyl. There is a suggestion that the priestesses in a ritual are directly spoken to by Dibella. However, others are suspicious about this. Either way, the Dibellan Sibyl is the member of the cult that is their spiritual leader. Now when it comes to the actual teachings of Dibella, she has some rather interesting teachings, including what she does permit and does not permit. With the teachings of Dibella, she teaches mortals that they should give themselves love. Dibella commands that her followers open your heart to the noble secrets of art and love. Treasure the gifts of friendship. Seek joy and inspiration in the mysteries of love, according to her commandment in the 10 Commandments of the 9 Divines. When it comes to the Dibellan teachings of relationships and how many people you can knock boots with at one time, so the Dibellan belief is about the quality of love, not the quantity. If the horizontal tango transports you, then why does it matter how many people you are on the dance floor with? Speaking of dance partners, we would also see the comments of a Dibellan Sibyl on what you could describe as relationships between the races. According to Sibyl Augustine in the Second Era, as long as the affection on both sides was pure, the relationship was divinely blessed by Dibella, with Dibella supposedly saying at some point, "No matter the seed, if the shoot is nurtured with love, will not the flower be beautiful?" So Dibella approves of relationships between the Baron and the Argonian, or the Argonian and the Harpy, as Dibella believes that there is beauty in making the beast with two backs, no matter who the partner is. Sort of. Now, when it comes to the sorts of relations that Dibella does not permit, followers of Dibella are discouraged from pursuing relationships with the undead. When it comes to relationships or attractions to vampires, the pull felt towards them by the mortal is not love, nor is it even knightly urges. Instead, it is a darker urge from an impure spirit that draws the mortal towards the vampire. This attraction has nothing to do with love or beauty, instead darkness and corruption, which Dibella does not approve of. So essentially, Dibella discourages from coffin-rocking behaviors. Stay out of graveyards when you are looking for your next date. So based on the teachings of Dibella, why would anyone choose to worship Dibella? Dibella is a rather accepting goddess, promoting self-love, not just a bit of afternoon delight. Although she does heavily encourage churning butter with your tail, Dibella encourages love in its purest, most beautiful form, when that affection comes from both of the participants involved in their relationship and the bedroom rodeo, no matter their race or their social status. The teachings of Dibella also encourage love in other forms, like that of friendship and finding the beauty and joy in the world around you, that the world is a much more positive place than one you may originally think. But this is only one part of the story, not the full picture. To learn more, we need to discuss the creations of Dibella. So when it comes to the creations of Dibella, her artifacts all have some element of beauty, even those which have been important in war. For these artifacts, we should begin with the Helm of the Crusader. Now, the Helm of the Crusader was an artifact created in the First Era, this being part of the set of armor created for Pellinol Whitestrake, who was the champion of Queen Alessia during the Alessian slave uprising. Pellinol would help the Alessians fight for their freedom against the Aedrids. As part of Pellinol becoming the champion of fighting against the Aedrids, he would be gifted a set of armor by the 8 Divines. 8 Divines, as Talos was not around at this point. He would go on to slay many Aedrid sorcerer kings, including their sort of leader, Tamriel the Unfeathered. So considering that Dibella was part of the 8 Divines, she would have a hand in creating this set of armor. She would create the part known as the Helm of the Crusader. However, Pellinol would not be the last owner of the helm. We would see the relic appear later on, this being in Vanua, which was a settlement that was built where Pellinol Whitestrake last stood. This settlement contained a shrine to Pellinol, which housed the Helm of the Crusader. Now in the Third Era, in the year 153, there would be an attempt from the knight Sir Amiel, an older knight who, for his last quest, desired to recover the Helm of the Crusader. At this time, because of the rising water of Lake Rumer, it would submerge the settlement of Vanua, also flooding the shrine, making it difficult to recover the helm. However, this would not stop Sir Amiel. Sir Amiel would manage to enter Vanua. However, he would find that he was not alone in the ruins. It would instead be filled with the undead. Considering that he was an elderly knight, he would struggle to fight off the creatures inhabiting these ruins, thus leading to Sir Amiel joining them in their watery grave. It would seem as if the Helm of the Crusader would never see the light of day. However, this would not be the case, as a brave pilgrim would set out on the quest to recover the set of armor the Knight of the Nine had once attempted to protect. This brave pilgrim being the hero of Kvatch. The hero of Kvatch, upon completing their pilgrimage to the way shrines of Cyrodiil, they would find themselves experiencing a vision. This vision being of Pellinol Whitestrake themselves, who would explain the importance of recovering the Crusader armor, as Tamriel the Unfeathered was not truly dead. Instead, he was just struck down, waiting and regaining his strength. He would return, and the hero of Kvatch would need to kill Umoril once and for all. This starting with recovering the helm of the Crusader, which the hero of Kvatch would do. The hero of Kvatch, like Sir Amiel, would travel to Vanua, looking for the relic. The hero of Kvatch would find the former settlement swarming with the undead. However, they would manage to find the helm of the Crusader, and unfortunately, the final resting place of Sir Amiel, one of the Knights of the Nine. So the hero of Kvatch managed to find the first piece of the relics of the Crusader. Now, although this helm was an object of war, the helm of the Crusader was also said to give its wearer serene beauty. Well, the power of serene beauty. Meaning, like those in the Order of the Lily, the wearer of the helm would also fight for beauty, and with beauty. But this was not the only artifact that Dibella is credited with creating. There is also the brush of true paint. Now, the brush of true paint is another interesting artifact. The bristles of this brush are said to be made from the hair of Dibella. Along with this, the way it works is rather different to any normal paintbrush. True paint transports the artist inside the canvas and paints whatever the person imagines onto the canvas, creating a sort of world inside of the canvas imagined by the artist. There has been cases of the brush of true paint being used. The first of these dating back to the Second Era at some point before the year 582. This being with the experiments of a cruel wizard known as Bravam Lithandus. So the story of Bravam and True Paint goes that he, for several months, would hold several people captive and experiment on them, using a combination of illusion and domination spells. The experiment would begin with just one person held captive, starting out in a shed, which the poor captive person would perceive as being made out of sweetmeats, attempting to eat the structure. Thankfully, the person would not eat rocks. They would be stopped by the wizard. But anyway, during the 5th month of the experiment, 3 people would live in Bravam's basement, believing that they were all nobles. So the wizard would desire more subjects to see how far this illusion could really go. And in the 6th month, we would see him continuing to mess with these captives. He would suggest to one that there was a werewolf lurking around the basement. However, the one he first mentioned it to was not the one to first observe the creature. Instead, it was another one of the captives who couldn't have heard Bravam's suggestions. This would leave Bravam to believe that the captives were linked. But none of this has anything to do with True Paint, nor does it have to do with Dibella. No, this would instead come 13 days later. The wizard would begin to lose control of his little experiment. He would feel as though there was something outside, interfering with what he had created. The subjects' minds had become resistant, and they had begun to behave differently. They were unintelligible and difficult to work with one of these participants sitting in a corner, rocking back and forth, muttering prayers to Dibella. Then 9 days later, something strange would happen. Bravam would enter the basement and find the only thing in the basement was a mural depicting the grand chamber of a palace. There were no subjects, no furnishings, and no supplies left in that basement. The only thing in that basement was a set of paints and a single brush lying in the corner, with no explanation for what happened to his captives. So Bravam Lithandus would document this entire experiment in a journal. This journal would become one of the tomes of forbidden knowledge that Hermaeus Mora possessed. Now in the year 582 in the Second Era, a Khajiit known as Bezad Joe would go on the search for the brush of true paint. So in his search he would find the journal of Bravam Lithandus, which he would read, and upon reading he would find the location. However, he would not be able to set off to recover this relic. As with the reading of this book, a Daedroth would be summoned, which would kill Bezad Joe. Although it would seem as if the brush of true paint would never be seen again with this sort of protection, this would not be the case, as we would see the brush of true paint reappear in the Third Era after the Arnesian War of 396. Now with this, there would be a painter who was fighting in the Arnesian War. During his time fighting this war, a rogue fireball would explode next to him. This would lead to the painter losing both of his arms. However, the painter did not want to give up his talent. Being a devout follower of Dibella, the painter would pray to Dibella, asking for her to provide a way for him to express himself once more, and Dibella would gift the man a paintbrush, the paintbrush being the brush of true paint. This would then be handed down to his son, Ryth Lithandus, who would become a famous painter. Now Ryth would go missing, his wife unable to find him in the year 433 in the Third Era. Because of this, she would ask the hero of Kvatch for help in finding Ryth. The hero of Kvatch would find the missing painter inside one of his own paintings, as he was trapped there, this being due to the work of a thief. An elf who had confronted him in his real-world studio, knocked him unconscious and then stolen true paint. Then the thief jumped into the painting, which is where he would paint trolls to guard himself. When Ryth awoke, he would jump into the painting, attempting to retrieve the sacred paintbrush. The hero of Kvatch would enter the painting and would be sent by Ryth to retrieve the paintbrush from the body of the thief. As the thief did not understand the risks of using the brush, as the trolls that the paintbrush created were not too willing to protect their creator, instead killing the elven thief. So the hero of Kvatch would kill the trolls and would recover the brush of true paint. This would allow Ryth and the hero of Kvatch to escape from the canvas. So based on the creations of Dibella, why would anyone choose to worship Dibella? Well, if we firstly look at the helm of the Crusader, this piece of armor is helpful for several reasons. It firstly protects the wearer, but it also allows the wearer to cast the lesser power, Serene Beauty, which calms those that it is used on, potentially allowing the wearer to escape some rather sticky situations. This helm also fortifies the personality of its wearer, making those they are speaking to perceive them better. This would be helpful for those who, although are wearing armor, may be trying to avoid fighting. Now, if we look at the brush of true paint and consider that rather than taking the skill of the artist into account, it takes the imagination, giving those who may not be the most artistically gifted, however instead have incredible imaginations, the ability to share what they envision, as long as they realize the dangers of their own imagination. So based on who Dibella is, her followers, the teachings of Dibella, and her creations, we can finally answer the question, why would anyone choose to worship Dibella? Well, when we take into account the creation stories, specifically Shazar's song, and how this plays out with the different gods in the pantheons of the humans versus the elves, considering that the gods of the humans were considered a lot more loving than the elven gods, even though the human gods also suffered and lost much when it came to creation. We see this with a quote, "We have suffered and are diminished for all time, but the mortal world we have made is glorious, filling our hearts and spirits with hope. Let us teach the mortal races to live well, to cherish beauty and honor, and to love one another as we love them." The love that the human gods felt for their mortal subjects, especially Dibella, would show through with the Crusader relics, considering that the 8 divines at the time provided Pelennor Whitestrake with a set of armor and weapons, including Dibella's creation, the Helm of the Crusader. This armor was created to assist the humans through their champion in their own freedom. Now, with the followers of Dibella, we see that she rewards those who are faithful to her. We see this in the various stories of the brush of true paint. In the captives of Bravam Lithandus, after one of the prisoners would gain enough clarity where he would spend his time praying to Dibella, those who were imprisoned by the cruel wizard would be gifted the brush of true paint. We see this as the only thing left in their prison was a paintbrush, some paint, and a mural that covered the entire basement. We also see the brush of true paint being a reward for another devout follower of Dibella, this being the artist who in the Third Era in the Arnesian War would lose both of his arms to a fireball. Now, he did not desire to give up painting, so he would turn to Dibella, praying for a way to continue, and she would provide that, this obviously being the brush of true paint. So Dibella greatly rewards those who are loyal to her, those who desire to create beauty in the world by rescuing them from their prisons, whether this be the basement of an evil wizard or the loss of their limbs. Now, when it comes to some of her other followers, we also see another group of artists, this being the Blushing Brush. They look for the beauty in all and attempt to share this beauty through their art, but there are others who seek out Dibella and her advice, like the Argonian in the Second Era asking the Sibyl of Dibella whether or not Dibella would approve of his love and taking a turn amongst the cabbages with a harpy. Now, Dibella, being the loving goddess she is, was rather approving. No matter the seed, if the shoot is nurtured with love, will not the flower be beautiful? So based on this, why would anyone worship Dibella? Well, Dibella is loved by artists due to the inspiration she gives, helping those who follow her to find the beauty in their surroundings. and find any way to continue their art form, even if they thought they would be unable to. For others, she inspires love and encourages relationships. Her temple and cult provide a place for people to be themselves and experience the beauty in the world. So you, yourself, may want to follow Dibella if you are an artist fascinated by the beauty of your surroundings, or you are a lover, not a fighter, treasuring friendships and your relationships and the gifts they bring. Or you are someone who just enjoys peeling the banana. So let me know in the comments, would you worship Dibella? A special thank you to all of our lore archaeologist supporters. You guys help keep this channel running. And thank you to anyone who is joining our memberships. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, you should check out this one. It is about Julianos, another member of the 9 Divines, and why anyone would choose to worship him.